All right, welcome back to the Tank Me Later podcast, which is part of Fantasy Basketball International and brought to you by Fantrax. This is episode 40. We're going to talk about a few different things, namely the in-season tournament, and talk about whether some players' numbers are real or if they are fake. So let's get into it. All right, as I said, a few different things to talk about, nothing any ground shaking topics, but I think I've said this in previous episodes, just trying to get through the new year, through the holidays, and then we will dive into some more exciting things. Got a good bit planned, mostly in my mind, and hopefully going to start reaching out to some people about having some fun guests and having some fun topics. But right now, it's kind of, like I said, scrambling to get through the holidays, coming up with what I can come up with, what's notable, and should still be good information and notable for both dynasty and redraft leagues. For this one, the first thing to talk about is the in-season tournament. It is Friday when I'm recording this, which means that last night the Lakers decimated the Pelicans and the Pacers came away with a win against the Bucks. And so the Lakers and Pacers will be facing off on Saturday in a game that won't count for fantasy basketball because it'll be both teams' 83rd game for their season. So it won't impact fantasy hoops. It'll just be a championship game with no fantasy implications. Should be a lot of fun to watch. Both teams are playing really well. The Lakers look phenomenal. And obviously the Pacers are still one of the best offenses in the league, if not the best offense, with a player that's playing out of his mind right now in Tyrese Halliburton. It's exciting to see a young player that has been really good for fantasy recently in like the last couple of years, especially last year. Had a lot of hype going into the season and was one of the best players. The team wasn't as successful, so maybe in the regular or real basketball landscape wasn't quite thought of as highly. Plus the shutdown impacted that, but it's fun to see them playing well. Great, like good team, a lot of fun, young players, and Tyrese Halliburton as well. Obviously, quite the superstar rising right in front of our eyes. A lot of fun. Pacers fans always great. I think not that I've dissected this and looked through and come to this conclusion, but I feel like Pacers fans are some of the most educated that I see on Twitter, or just the people that I see on Twitter that are educated tend to be Pacers fans. So fun to see that. Fans deserve it. But yeah, as far as the in-season tournament, we can look at what happened this year, and I'm sure they'll make changes heading into next year when they do it again. Obviously, it was the first year doing it, so they're going to learn a lot and should be even better next year. There wasn't many things bad about it. I think at the beginning it was kind of weird. A lot of people were like, what's the point? Are people going to care? Why should I care? But I think the players care, one, because they're competitive athletes. Their competitiveness, generally speaking, is what allowed them to play professional basketball at the highest level. So they care about the games regardless, as long as they're playing. And I don't think that there's too many guys. There probably are some, but there's not too many guys in the NBA that don't care about winning when they're on the floor, like for one reason or another, whether they want to win games or just a sense of pride of wanting to be seen as a professional athlete and somebody that was deserving to get there. Whatever the reason is, people care. So wasn't going to be an issue about them caring about the games, but it seems like they have even more of a competitive edge. Maybe there's a few players that don't like the in-season tournament because of the point differential thing. I mean, DeMar DeRozan seemed to be pretty against that. Will Hardy, Jazz coach, seemed to be pretty against the point differential thing. But I think when it comes down to it, it's not really an issue. I think it's not running up the score if it's for this. Like everybody kind of knows that. So things like that, sure, I guess it's not flawless because it is change, and change from regular games isn't something that always goes over smoothly, even if it is something that ends up helping in the long run. Because I mean, I think, about a quarter of the way through the regular season, and we've played a lot of competitive games already. And now the next 2 months or so will be focusing on what's going to happen up until the trade deadline and the All-Star game, getting All-Star votes. So a lot of just bringing more value to earlier games, because I feel like a lot of times those kind of get lost. People don't care about them as much, because it's from opening night until All-Star break. It's about 3 months, and sometimes that ends up being a long time. So having that, to kind of even divide up the season even further. So now it's kind of like the quarter way through. Okay, where are we looking at? What teams are playing well? Does playing well in the in-season tournament give us a little bit more of a confidence boost us for where we're at? Because the Pacers, are not one of the best record in the East. They're fifth, sitting at 12-8 now because they won the last 2 games of the in-season tournament. They're a team that's like, okay, cool. Like, we just did this thing. Like, why can't we go win a championship? So I think that's kind of cool to see them get that kind of, I don't know, evaluation midway through for a team that wasn't even in the playoffs last year. So jumping out of the gates, you're able to get a good evaluation for your team. Also, it was just a lot of fun watching the games on the neutral court. I think one thing that was pretty clear that will be adjusted for next year is the early start time. Thursday's 2 games, one started at 5 p.m. Eastern time and one started at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So very strange, because local time, that's 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. So like, I get it. You like, that's where people are. Sure, it's like monumental. Like, let's have people watch it, but nobody's going to be able to watch it that early. So that was kind of strange. So that'll get changed for next year. Shouldn't be anything that's, I mean, I would assume it gets changed. Maybe they'll just keep it, but whatever they end up doing won't impact fantasy all that much. But the things that will, which I think were things that people kind of discussed even entering into this week, was, okay, the teams that make it, they have players obviously playing on days that nobody else is playing. So it brings a little bit more value to guys that may not be regularly rostered in standard leagues, but because there's only 2 games, having that extra games played advantage ends up being pretty huge. In the industry pickup league, just keeping up with the transactions in there, it's kind of interesting to see like the amount of fab that's spent on guys just because they're the only ones playing that day. Like, for example, Mitch Casey spent 15 fab on Jose Alvarado, just because he was going to be playing Thursday night. Josh Lloyd spent 44 on Obi Toppin just because he was going to be playing Thursday night. Najee Marshall, Alex Reclean spent 13 on him, and also had previously spent 19 on Josh Okogie just because he was going to be playing on Tuesday night. Tuesday night they played the Lakers. So saving a little bit of fab to kind of help you win that week is not the worst idea. It could actually end up helping you out a lot. Luckily, going against B-Dub this week in that, he didn't make too many moves, and none of them were, actually looks like the moves that he made weren't for guys that played in the in-season tournament games. He picked up Jaden Ivey and Derek Jones Jr., both good pickups, but didn't get any sort of games played advantage on me, which kind of helps because we'll see how how it goes going into the last day, because this week ends on a Friday. I'm up 5-4 currently, hoping to be able to hold on there, but it should be a good one, depending on who's healthy. I think the only one that may or may not play for him is Mark Williams, and everybody is healthy for me. Finally have Anthony Simons back, who's a guy that we'll probably discuss later, as I'm getting attacked by the curtains behind me because I'm not at home. I'm traveling, so this is why the lighting looks weird and why I'm getting attacked by curtains, because it's a little windy. But overall, in-season tournament, great success so far, and excited to see who wins the championship. It's been, obviously the players getting some extra money, especially guys that aren't making the big bucks. It's kind of cool to see for them. But yeah, in-season tournament's great. I guess the advice to kind of take away is less about drafting and more about picking up free agents, because, yeah, sure, you're going to draft players that are going to potentially play in that. because it gives you the advantage isn't massive enough for me to value a slightly worse player in fantasy that's on a better team and has a better chance of making it than a player that is better for fantasy but is probably going to play on the heavy day as opposed to the light day because they didn't make the in-season tournament. Like, one, it's 1 week, not a big deal. Two, just because it's less about, okay, all these guys are playing on Wednesday and Friday. Now my guys are only like aren't going to play on Tuesday and Thursday. Like, the advantage is from having more players play on Tuesday and Thursday. So for the teams that make the in-season tournament, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, they'll have a streaming boost that week. That's the main fantasy takeaway that might be different from a regular week. Overall, just fun basketball. Not necessarily anything that is dramatically shaking the fantasy landscape, which is, I guess, not any different from what we expected. But the next thing that I want to go through, and again, as I said at the beginning, just trying to get through the holidays. Not get through because I'm not excited, but get through and for the sense of been busy and traveling a lot. So hard to plan out episodes. So January should be more organized. Right now, it's shorter episodes that are just whatever I can come up with that week. But I want to try something called, I guess, call it real or fake. Real or fake. That's the segment. And talking about players' numbers and whether they are legit, going to stick around, or if it's something that isn't what it seems, or if it's something that, yeah, great, they're doing well with that, but it's probably not going to stick. And I went pretty in depth with one of them. And then if people like it, I'll continue to go in depth with others, but the other ones are just kind of like listed out and we'll talk about it because it's more fantasy value, which is easier to just talk through why things look the way they do. But this was one that I'd already kind of mentally been keeping an eye on. So it was fun to go through and look at numbers and look at film and dissect exactly why things look the way they do. And I think that's what I want to be able to do more of. And half the reason that I'm only doing one of these is I didn't have much or as much time as I'd like to go through like 5 to 10 of these at a time and explain why. But this one was an easy one because I had already kind of had it on my radar. Trae Young's averaging 1.5 steals per game this year. And I think that's something that's actually going to stick. It's Trae Young's reputation is that of a player that isn't very good defensively, a defensive liability, one of the worst defenders in the league, depending on how mean you want to be about it, or just honest, however honest you want to be about it. This year, averaging a career high in steals, which obviously steals don't directly translate to how impactful a player is defensively, but they're a good indicator of them being a defensive disruptor, which is for a guy that is small, like a one-man offense, but a small player that even when he tries really hard on defense, which effort has also been an issue through his first 5 or so years, him trying doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get stops just because he's not built to get stops. So him providing effort, one, is huge, but two, getting steals and disrupting defensively, forcing turnovers helps him to make up for the plays where he's just outmatched. So going through, I know last week when I was discussing DeAndre Ayton's steals, I went through, watched his steals. A lot of them like weren't him making plays. Like a lot of them were right place, right time, more so than the ones where he had active hands in pick and roll scenarios and was making plays. I felt kind of the opposite for Trae Young. Like there was certainly times where somebody else poked the ball loose. He was the one to grab it. He got the steal, which, great, whatever, nice for fantasy, but not him really like doing anything other than having his head up and being active, which I don't know how much everybody has watched every single Trae Young play, because I feel like as a Hawks fan, even before I was doing anything fantasy, watching almost every Trae Young game, almost every Trae Young play, definitely times where he was just falling asleep on defense. And so seeing him not do that has been huge just for him individually. Great to see that. And if you were able to see the last 2 games they've played against the Nets were both incredibly close, 1 by 2 in overtime, and then on Wednesday of this week. They lost by 1, but his late game defense in both games, guarding Mikal Bridges and like literally like last 10 seconds of the game, on ball defense on Bridges, and being able to make plays and stay in front of him. Like a lot of times, one, either when he was off the ball, getting back cut and just not paying attention. It's like, dude, come on. Like the least you can do is not allow a back cut or like stick with somebody. And then on ball defense, a lot of times it was letting someone go by and trying to back tap it out and force a turnover. But he's moving his feet, he's staying in front, which is great. He was able to force a turnover in the game they won. Got a steal for that. And then a lot of his steals have also come from him intercepting passes. So one, he's playing better on ball defense. He's more active defensively, and being active has allowed him to, be in the right spot to just kind of move a few steps and intercept a bad pass. So he's just active, and that's kind of all you can ask for a guy that is 6'1", and I don't know his exact weight. I'm not calorie counting every NBA player, but a smaller player that's not going to get a ton of stops. So forcing turnovers is huge. Makes him and DeJounte Murray kind of a lethal backcourt as far as both of them being able to get steals, force turnovers, get fast breaks. Helpful for a defense that has been bad. So if they don't necessarily have to get a stop every play, well, excuse me. Yes, that's the goal, but it's not like they're going to be relying on, okay, we need to get a stop here, and we're just going to keep stopping these teams, and that's how we're going to win. It's, okay, we'll play defense, and the more turnovers we can force, get some easy offense, and outscore. So is it the ideal method for winning in the NBA? Maybe not, but it's kind of what's they've been trying to do, and what's worked for fantasy. Another thing is he's averaging 2.8 deflections per game. And just for a reference, Jalen Suggs is averaging 2.9, Marcus Smart's averaging 3, and a tie for the league leaders at 3.6 is SGA Jokic and Donovan Mitchell. So up there getting some of the most deflections in the league, which again, just him being active defensively is such a huge step for him. His defensive EPM is significantly better than it has been in the past. I know I've seen that pulled up a few times on Twitter. So not saying Trae Young lockdown defender, saying Trae Young playing defense at a competent NBA level. That's about all you can ask for a player that when he's hitting shots, obviously he wasn't at the beginning of the season. He is starting to now. When he's hitting shots, he's top 5 offensive player in the league by himself. I think pretty safely top 10, maybe top 5, but probably like as far as one-man offense that can, now that I'm thinking through names, I'm trying not to be biased and say maybe I do need to just say top 10. But as far as a guy, I mean, he's made the Hawks offense one of the best in the league, despite not a lot of other offensive players in the league or on their team. Not a lot of elite offensive players on the team that he has played with throughout his career, but the offense has always been good. So I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, not as, one-on-one, check up the top of the key. Trae Young is one of the 5 best on ball. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as far as his ability to get his own shot, score, get to the free throw line, despite some questionable methods at times, and find other players for easy buckets and getting assists, one of the best offensive players in the league. I think that's a pretty unbiased way for me to say that. But yeah, overall, like I don't see a reason why the 1.5 steals per game won't stick. He's had a steal in every game except 2, which is just huge for him to be able to make an impact defensively. It also helps out with his fantasy value for him to be getting that many steals. I mean, there's been more steals per game this year. I think SGA is leading the league at like 2.7. But last year, I think OG Anunoby led it with 1.9. So Trae Young would have been among the league leaders last year. I think he still is this year, but he would have been closer to the league lead last year. So good for his fantasy value, because when he wasn't hitting shots and his field goal percentage was even lower than we kind of expected, he was still able to put up some numbers and get some easy buckets out of it. So, yeah, I think that's something that's going to stick. So the rest of these aren't quite as in-depth as far as numbers and film, but they should be kind of easy to go through, talk about, be fairly obvious. Bojan Bogdanovic has played 2 games since he returned. has played 2 games this season after missing the first bit due to injury. Just season long, averaging 22 points, 3 boards, 4.5 assists, 2 steals, shooting 50% from the field, 3.5 threes. Going through that, the steals and assists would be career highs for him by a good bit. And because his previous career high for steals was 0.9, so nowhere near 2. His previous career high for assists was last year at 2.6, nowhere near 4.5. Previous career high for threes was 3, which he did a few years ago with the Jazz, so not quite 3.5. 22 points, he averaged 21.6 last year. But looking at Basketball Monster, he is 10th in the league per game value. Now, obviously, I don't think this one is a ridiculous statement. It's probably one that anyone would look at and say, well, duh, that's not going to stick. But just pointing it out, you look at the numbers, it says top 10 fantasy player. And the steals aren't going to stick. The assists aren't going to stick. The points and threes probably will. He's not going to shoot 50% from the field. He never has in his career. If he does, great. That'll be huge for his value. But a lot of it is just going to come from the points and threes. But if you're able to play in a league where somebody takes fantasy value at face value and says, it's been 2 games, but he's a top 10 player. Like maybe he should be at least top 50 for this year. He's the only player on the Pistons. Everybody else stinks. Well, not everybody else, but a lot of other players. And there's no reason for him to not put up numbers. Cool. Sell high. Go ahead. Sell high. I mean, he's a guy that if it was sitting on your waiver wire, please pick him up. If you have him and are able to sell high, go for it. Seriously doubt anybody's going to take him as a top 10 guy, but heck, I mean, that's what the numbers are saying. And I think it's pretty easy to look at the numbers and say, small sample size, not going to take that seriously. So cool. Just glad you already knew that then. Last 3 games, well, actually, we'll say last 2 games for Orlando Robinson, because if you look at Basketball Monster, that's the way it lays it out. Over the past week, played 2 games, the averaging 15.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals, 2 threes, shooting 60% from the floor, playing 31.3 minutes per game. Obviously, that is because Bam Adebayo is out. I think like Orlando Robinson is going to continue to start as long as Bam is out. And there's not really a clear timeline for as far as Bam will return. Like it might be like he's not playing Friday. He may be back Monday if they play Monday. I don't know their exact schedule. So whenever their next game is, he could be back, and great, one more game of Orlando Robinson. But if Bam is out again, like goodness, pick up Orlando Robinson. He's playing phenomenal. And there's the reason that those numbers are what they are is because of the opportunity. Like he's a talented player. He's the second best center behind Bam. The Thomas Bryant thing isn't going to come back. Like Orlando Robinson is the backup center, and he's the fill-in when Bam misses time or misses a game here and there. That's about it. But for Dynasty, that's great because he's a guy that I think has been kind of stashed the past 2 years because this is year 2 for him. Has played well, has had some good summer league games. So it's kind of a guy that you say maybe the next undrafted success story for Miami. Could happen. I mean, doubt that he ever starts over Bam or gets to the point where they're moving off Bam for him. Like it's not like that, but it's a guy that could have a couple solid years in Miami and as a backup and then end up earning a contract elsewhere and providing really good fantasy value. So a guy to keep an eye on and stash in dynasty leagues and a guy to stream in redraft leagues until Bam is back in the lineup. A few of the Wizards guys have actually been playing pretty well, specifically really in that game against the 76ers on Wednesday. Jordan Poole had 23 points, 1 rebound, 2 assists, 1 steal, 3 threes, shot 10 of 16. Tyus Jones had 20 points, shot 8 of 11, 3 boards, 8 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks. Daniel Gafford in 23 minutes because he fouled out, 18 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, a steal, and 2 blocks. I mean, one, I think it kind of shows that the Wizards kind of like, not that anybody didn't know this, but really are not good. Like they got the best game of the season for most of their players. And obviously, Joel Embiid scoring 50 impacted that, but they weren't able to still get a win. But is this a sign of hope for some of these guys? I'm just double checking this, but this is the first time Jordan Poole shot over 50% from the floor in a game in over a month. And actually, the last time that he did it was also against the 76ers. And the only other time he did it was against the Heat, which was the game before. So this is the third time this season that Jordan Poole shot over 50% from the field. So that's a positive, even if it doesn't seem like a big deal. It's a positive for him. Can he keep that up? I wouldn't bank on it, but hopefully he can, because we saw what he did with Golden State, even though it wasn't always the most efficient. We've seen what he has done with Washington, and it has been just I couldn't have predicted that. I would have thought that it would have been, oh, sure, there's some bad plays, and it's funny, but like they kind of stink, so who really cares? Not like as bad as he is, and the bad, silly plays at times. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come. Tyus Jones and Daniel Gafford. Like, I think Daniel Gafford's numbers have still been fine. Like, this wasn't an outlandishly good performance for him, but it was still good to see him do that against Joel Embiid, even if he did foul out. But specifically Tyus Jones and Jordan Poole, is that something that we're going to continue to see from them? Do we know? I wouldn't bank on either of them continuing to play as well as they did in that game. I think Jordan Poole will be better than he has been, but I think I've been kind of saying that all season as like it can't get worse than what it has been so far. Like it has to get better. Could we see more games like this from him? Maybe. I think that's kind of the positive way to look at it, not as finally he played a good game, but it's probably the only one we're going to get. Same thing with Tyus Jones. It's just been less notable because I think the expectations generally for him were lower, but the fantasy community was obviously hoping for him to do what he kind of did when he started in place of John Morant. That hasn't been the case at all. I think before I'm willing to say, yes, both of these guys are going to keep this up and continue to play really well after a really good game, I need to see it a couple more times for me to feel more confident in both those guys who I have, or I think I may have finally cut Tyus Jones in the league that I had him. But guys that I felt confident in heading into the season, I thought it was going to be a good situation for fantasy, even if it wasn't good for winning. That hasn't been the case. It's just been bad overall. Hopefully this will, I'm going to always try and stay as positive as I can, and say that I'm hoping that these players play better. Blanket statement across 30 teams. I'm not super confident that this is finally we're seeing what we expected out of them. Here it comes. The next few weeks, everybody's going to get put on notice by Jordan Poole and Tyus Jones taking over fantasy basketball. No, I'm not banking on that. If I'm wrong, cool. I really need Jordan Poole's help in industry pickup. I'm not banking on it, though. The next one, Anthony Simons, was finally able to play again. Has played, I think, just played the one game against the Warriors. He's playing again tonight. That's what it is. So first game back, 28 points, 1 rebound, 4 assists, 6 threes, shot 27 times, made 37% of them, which isn't ideal. It's just not, but it's good. It's a good start for him. It's good for him to be back out there. Malcolm Brogdon is questionable, so we'll see if he plays. If he doesn't, Anthony Simons is probably just going to be the point guard, which is great. His best days in fantasy were when Damian Lillard was out, and he was able to be the point guard, and he was getting like 25 points, 5 threes, and 6 assists pretty consistently. Would be great to see him do that again. Hard to do that when Malcolm Brogdon is also playing point guard and Scoot Henderson's having to get his minutes. So we'll kind of see what this rotation looks like. I think with Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton also out, it's a really good opportunity for him to just kind of take over offensively and have a big night. They play Dallas, which, I mean, Dallas just blew the Jazz out of the water in their last game. So we'll see what that looks like. We'll see if another guy that we're going to talk about here in a second is able to do anything to kind of slow Anthony Simons down at all. But I'm excited that he's back. I think that him putting up big numbers is something that we should expect for the rest of the season. And it was annoying to have him out for over a month, but hopefully he can stay healthy. He's a really good fantasy player when he gets the opportunity to be, and I think this is a great chance for him too. But Malcolm Brogdon is questionable, so I wouldn't imagine he's out long, which kind of stinks. So this may be like a one-off big Anthony Simons game, but he'll still be really good after that. But this just might be the best opportunity for him to have a really big performance with both his scoring and his assists. The next one is Trey Mann. Kind of probably fell off the radar for most people that are playing fantasy. He had a 26-point game in the G League, got rewarded with some minutes, ended up playing 24 minutes off the bench in their loss to Houston. Josh Giddey only played 25 as a starter. Trey Mann had 10 points, 3 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, hit 2 threes. They were a +7 in his minutes, which, it's a good thing considering all the starters were a negative plus-minus and almost all the bench players were positive. Yet it's just weird lineups and rotations because that didn't necessarily line up directly with Houston having a positive plus-minus for their starters and negative for their bench. Like, it was mostly positive all around for them. So I think it's something to keep an eye on, as like Trey Mann is somebody to keep an eye on over these next few games. Like, was this like you had a good game in the G League, like, let's get you some minutes and see how you do. Oh, you played well? Cool. Okay. Now we know you can play well. Like, that's about it. Or is this something where he's earned minutes in a situation with a iffy point guard situation? Like, Josh Giddey has not been producing this year for fantasy basketball. Whether the Thunder feel comfortable sticking with him or not as their starting point guard, I don't imagine that his starting job isn't necessarily in question. I don't think. I don't imagine that they would bench him. If it happens, then I think Cason Wallace is probably the next guy that would slide into the starting lineup. I don't think it would be Trey Mann, but he is another guy that provides some instant offense, can, I think, play 20 minutes per game off the bench and be productive for them. Now, Lou Dort only played 15 minutes in that game. Was Trey Mann only sliding in because of that? Would he have only played about 15 minutes per game? But we'll see. I think that's something to keep an eye on. I don't think he's a guy to target in standard redraft leagues, but I think in dynasty leagues with a deeper roster, he's a guy that, has some upside as a scorer. Maybe doesn't have a great fantasy game. I don't think he always is going to shoot 50% from the floor like he did. But got some assists, got some steals, flashed some good things, in 30-team dynasty leagues or 30-team redraft leagues. You're always looking for anybody that can contribute a couple numbers here and there and has the upside to go off. So I got to keep on your radar. And this other guy is probably also just another guy to keep on your radar, which is the aforementioned player that will be trying to slow down Anthony Simons, is Dante Exum, Adam King and I's king, the guy that has been the focus of, or not focus, but a topic on every show we've done. We've tried to mention him at least once. And now he's starting. Grant Williams was out for the last game and is out again on Friday. Dante Exum is starting. He didn't play a ton of minutes in that game because they won by 50 and were a +40 in his minutes in his revenge game against the team that drafted him. But 26 minutes, had 5 points, 6 boards, 7 assists, 2 steals, and a 3, shot 2 of 9. Shooting, or like a lack of shooting production, was kind of always an issue for him. When he was first drafted and a young guy in the league, part of the reason that he went overseas for a couple of years was his lack of shooting. He had shown a little bit of a better shot, but I don't think it's something that, okay, great, now we can get 4 or 5 threes a game from him when he's starting. Don't think that's the case, but competent floor spacer, knock down a 3. But really it's the rebounds, assists, steals that he can kind of provide. He's got another start under his belt in place of Grant Williams. I imagine that sticks Friday night. Hopefully he can be part of the rotation, but I kind of doubt it that when everybody's healthy, because Josh Green has also been out. I'm pretty sure they have somebody else that is out as well. I'm going to, as I'm talking about this, look at the injury report so that I can confirm that. Nope, just Josh Green. I think Josh Green would be starting if it wasn't like if Grant Williams is out, Josh Green is active. It would be him, not Exum. But still cool to see him getting a chance to start. Hopefully he can have another pretty solid game and continue to be part of the rotation. But I don't think he's worth streaming in standard leagues, which would be like a 12-team league, points or category. But in a 30-team league, let's keep an eye on him. If anything, just for the hype, both Kingy and I would love it if Dante Exum was on your roster. Like it would mean the world to us. Even if it doesn't necessarily make sense for fantasy basketball, it would bring a smile to my face. And, I don't have any issues with that. But those are the guys that I wanted to discuss. Hopefully going to in the future, probably not just starting next year, but include more film and advanced stats that aren't directly correlated to, like, for example, including deflections per game for Trae Young as opposed to just his steals per game. Like things like that if a player maybe gets multiple deflections but just hasn't gotten steals, okay, well, maybe the steals are coming. Or if they're getting a bunch of steals but not a bunch of deflections, like, okay, like maybe when they get deflections, they're just getting lucky and some of them are bouncing the right way and these steals might not stick. So things like that, as well as the film as far as, is this player really active in the passing lanes? Is this player forcing players to turn the ball over with his defense and just throw it away? Is this player poking the ball loose on ball handlers? Is this player just right place, right time, getting lucky a bunch and this isn't going to stick? Hopefully it's more than just, I plan for it to be more than just steals. Those have been two things that have been surprising numbers early on from DeAndre Ayton steals and Trae Young steals, and things that it's a pretty volatile stat. So it's easy to say, hey, this is going to stick or this isn't going to stick just by looking at kind of what's happening. But also looking at other ways that players are developing with their film. Like, are they adding new things to their game as far as ways to score? Are they getting smarter with making extra passes? What's making certain players have really good seasons? Like, started trying to look at some Tyrese Halliburton numbers as far as like how he operates in the pick and roll and different percentages like that, and seeing what he's doing more effectively than last year. So things like that I'm hoping to dive into more starting in January, next couple of weeks, maybe just more Q&As and general thoughts and such. But yeah, like I said, shorter episode. Hope it was still filled with good information. And just as a reminder, follow at FBI Basketball on Twitter or X. You can follow me at NoahRubin22 if you have other fantasy-related questions or you need an opinion on a potential trade or a potential pickup. As always, you can just tweet at me at NoahRubin22. Generally, I'm able to get to those. Sometimes I'm not. I apologize if I'm not. Including league type, league scoring format, any other added context that would impact the trade would help me answer the question the best that I can. And then rate, review, comment on this episode, whether you're getting on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, something else. Any way for you to share it or review it or just like it helps us out a ton. But like I said, that's going to do it for this episode, and thanks for listening.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.